I don't know how the short-term industry is going to get through this. It's going to be 24 months of pain, without a doubt. I mean, I've been following the industry closely, listening to organizations like Skift and others, sort of understanding what the Marriotts of the world are saying. Generally, the guys tend to be cautiously optimistic because they have to be. But the reality is in the data, and the data is telling us right now that there's just a massive impact in short term. And for me, co-living provides stability because there's contractual income. The project that we are taking on is a pivot from not an old hotel, but sort of a traditional apartment style hotel. I mean, you're seeing a lot of companies internationally that have got big master leases, and the arbitrage is really in that sort of difference between your contractual rent and your short-term gross income. I think that's completely blown out of the water right now.
Hello, everybody. Christine here with another weekly episode of the Co-Living Code Show. I'm the CEO of Kindred, which is a software platform for the co-living industry. And a couple quick things I want to mention. As most of you already know, our 2 new books are out, the Co-Living Code Investor Guide and the Co-Living Code book for large operators and developers. It's on Amazon, or you can pick up a digital copy. Just reach out to our team. And also, we are still hosting our weekly co-living forum. It's on Zoom. It's every Wednesday. We bring on operators from around the world, whoever wants to join us, anybody that has to do with co-living, and just kind of share, tips, tricks, and strategies on how to get through this very unique time with the pandemic. And lastly, we are opening up the show to sponsors finally after almost 2 years. So you can reach out directly to us if that's of interest to you. And let's launch into this week's show. So finally, somebody from South Africa, really excited. We had an incredible conversation. Murray has a creative flair for understanding what it takes to build sustainable places and spaces of the future that breathe new life into communities. Spanning his 15-year career, Murray has developed over 40 buildings with a combined project value in excess of $200 million. Murray has been recognized by industry bodies as one of South Africa's leading young minds in the property sector, having been awarded the SACSC, South Africa's Council of Shopping Centers, Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award back in 2019. Using his expertise in planning, development, and asset management, his understanding of what places can be, and his determination to build a better future, Murray, through his company Neighbourgood, creates beautiful spaces that make living and working better. Neighbourgood is a next-generation property development and management company focused on curating and developing mixed-use neighborhoods that make living and working better. Neighbourgood's core focus is to breathe life into towns and cities across South Africa by creating sustainable places and spaces of the future underpinned by community, technology, and mixed-use shared economy themes. And we're excited as Kindred to actually partner with them as their technology platform. So we will waste no more time in bringing on Murray with Neighbourgood in Cape Town, South Africa. Christine here with our guest for the week, Murray Clark. He is with Neighbourgood, and this is the first time we're bringing on somebody from South Africa. He's in Cape Town, so really excited about what they're launching. They're signing the deal as we speak. So Murray, welcome to the Co-Living Code.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I've listened to all of your shows, well, almost all of them, and love what you guys are doing. And thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's just launch right into it. How long have you been working on Neighbourgood, which is an adorable name, by the way? I love it.
Thank you.
Talk about the project and how long you've been working on it.
So Neighbourgood is the evolution of a brand that we created called Good. We are a next generation property development company that exists to build neighborhoods that make living and working better. We're all about trying to understand what the future of space looks like. I have been in the property development space for about 10 to 15 years, well, to be exact, about 12 and a half. And obviously, physical space has changed substantially over the last 5 to 10 years. And as we evolve into the digital world in which we live, we're trying to understand what space looks like as well. And so Neighbourgood for me joins two things. One, just social impact and what it means to really give back in the world. And we believe that neighborhoods are platforms for people and community growth, and thriving neighborhood is a good barometer for a healthy society. And so that's who we are. We're really trying to build spaces and platforms that people can identify with. And our project that we've got coming up is in the beautiful city of Cape Town, which is where I live. It consists of 30 hotel-type apartments that we are busy repurposing at the moment, from short-term stays to long-term. Obviously, the impact of COVID has had real impact on cash flows for, globally, landlords are under real pressure. And so the pivot here for us is to get involved to manage the co-living space, which will be Neighbourgood, as part of an existing mixed-use environment that has food and beverage, some traditional offices, a co-work space, which we'll also be managing, which is about 1,800 square meters, 30 co-living apartments, and then a phase 2, which has another 100 or so apartments. So the whole idea is to create this very blended mixed-use space where people can come and enjoy. If you want to train, if you want to come and have coffee, if you want to use our boardroom space, if you want to stay with us, we offer both a short and long-term option. And just enjoy what we've got to offer. We think that Neighbourgood as a brand can help bring that to life. And so we're partnering with a listed property fund to bring their vision to life as well. And help solve a cash flow problem in the short to medium term, hopefully for them.
Awesome. And then are you guys doing like a profit share model with the developer, with the real estate group, or are you doing a master lease?
So we are doing a rev share model, and the workspace is structured in such a way that we've got a rev share. So we work for our money. We have a capitalized fee as well, which gets brought into the development phase, which is the development management component, the construction management component. All of these spaces that we create obviously take time and energy. So we've capitalized a fee into the process of that. And then on the residential component, there's a management fee with some upside. And so it's actually a bit of a combination of both. We're trying to avoid traditional leases, which come with risk depending on how they're structured. There's obviously a varying degree of risk, because some leases don't necessarily have too much risk in them, and we understand those as well. But it's the deal that we've structured aligns our interests to the landlords. We've got every intention of making the space as beautiful as possible. And we think it's the future. So yeah, we're excited to bring it to life. And for you and your audience, anytime you come to Cape Town, next time either international flights are open, you are welcome to come and stay with us.
Awesome. I know Cape Town's on the top of my list because I haven't been yet, but I've heard amazing things. And when you say short term, how short, like nightly?
So yeah, we have a core competency around delivering short-term as well. I like integrating a bit of short-term. It speaks to the addition of flavor. It just, I think the world is a little bit more nomadic, and it will continue to be. So we've reserved a component of our space for short-term stays. We think that there is obviously the upside. When short-term is throttling at full pace, there's always going to be that arbitrage that you don't get from long-term stays. So, I mean, if you take a particular room, you'll end up making more at a 95% occupancy through the month than you will off a traditional long-term stay. So what we're going to do is we'll throttle that risk. So as and when the demand comes in for short-term in 12, 18 months, we'll bring it up a little bit. We think it will probably be in the sort of 25% mark. So if you take 100% of our units, we think about 25% of them will be short term, and as and when phase 2 comes in, we might integrate a bit more short term. But we just need to see. Right now, the demand is in that 6 to 12 month space. It's in, growing a community, and I think it's difficult to have too much short term when it comes to building a long-term sustainable community. So yeah, we'll just assess how that goes, and we'll manage it accordingly.
No, that's smart. I love that, because obviously the zoning is there. Like, you're fine doing mixed use, right?
Yeah, I think the beauty of mixed use is that you've got everything under one, under one roof. As I said, like if you want to go to yoga in the morning, or if you want to grab groceries, or if you want to grab a good coffee. So we are sort of fundamental believers in the power of mixed use and shared economy, and integrating both of those is just a recipe for success, in our view at least. So we're really trying to bring those themes into every development we're involved with.
I love that. And so the long term, now let's talk about the long term, because again, every city around the world does it differently. You said 12 months to 18 months. Are you going to do 6 months? Yeah.
So we'll probably start off with a 3-month lease. We'll extend up to 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. When I was talking about long term, I was talking about throttling and short term over an 18-month period, as and when the demand comes back. But we'll price our leases accordingly. I think the average lease will probably be between 6 and 12 months, which seems to be in line with industry standards. But that flexibility will be there. We're going to try and bring in sort of notice periods that are in line with industry trends, that allow for flexibility. We have another 3 or 4 projects on the go at the moment that will introduce a network of spaces across Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, which is the sort of 3 major cities in South Africa. And the nice thing about being a Neighbourgood member is that you'll get to float and sort of experience all of them, and we will encourage across both living and working. So if you're in a city and you want to stay with us, whether it be on a short or long-term perspective, you'll have spaces available. And we think that there's just real benefit to the themes that we're creating, and that the industry is creating at a shared economy level, not just to co-living, but to co-housing and potentially even retirement. The value of shared economy, people often think about shared economy as this like 18 to 35-year-old thing that's unique to us. And I honestly think that there's just so many benefits to integrating shared economy principles across all standards of physical space. And so we're toying with various different ideas and thoughts around what shared economy and flexibility means to all forms of housing, including co-living, service living, co-housing, and retirement, which basically is sort of the 20 to 70, 80-year-old mark.
Yeah, no. I think that's the next vertical that's going to get really popular, is that senior living. And so on the shared part, let's say in your mixed use, is there going to be bicycles, like actual items to share amongst the community, like bicycles and so forth?
Yeah, so I mean, we're fortunate. There's a very close proximity. We've got something called the Vna Waterfront, which is super iconic. Everyone remembers South Africa for our 2010 World Cup. And so we've got this beautiful stadium almost next door, a beautiful Vna Waterfront, which you can take to get on a ferry and go to Robben Island, which everyone knows about. And there's, luckily for Cape Town, we've got quite a pedestrian city that's fairly safe. So we'll have access to bikes, bicycles, access to both digital and physical wellness classes. I really like what's come through this sort of COVID period, outside of obviously the devastating human cost, is what the impact of digital and how we've sort of moved our lives online. And so I like the idea of offering a complete omni-channel solution to space across our living, working, and health and wellness. And then everything we can do that offers sort of shared economy within our community and our extended community. We're taking a view on what it means to build a healthy neighborhood. And so our first community is the 30 people that are going to be staying with us, but within our platform that will be launching quite soon, which obviously we're working with Kindred on, which we're really excited about, is integrating businesses and people who make up the neighborhood around us, because it's not just us, and we don't think that the spirit of good and neighborhood should be contained within the four walls of our space. So we'd really like to see the energy and our mission and vision extend to the streets around the space that we have, and the benefits that go with living a more conscious life, that I think will integrate into Neighbourgood as a consolidated offering. So we're excited about doing more than just in our space, and delivering something that is out of this world.
Amazing. And so you said there's already future developments on the pipeline. What's your bed count going to be like in the next couple of years, you think, between all those cities?
Yeah, I think we'll probably get to 1,000 pretty quickly. The shortage, urbanization is obviously something that is driving a trend towards co-living plus cost of living, et cetera, et cetera. But in South Africa, the issue that we have here, which is similar to the US and Europe and other areas in Asia, is that there's just a massive oversupply of offices and redundant physical space that needs to be repurposed for a modern day consumer. And we as a vehicle, being Neighbourgood, we believe that we are very collaborative and next gen as a property development company. And so the opportunity is to repurpose the massive amount of physical space that has an identity crisis at the moment and doesn't really know what it is. To give you context, our listed property sector in South Africa, is circa 300 billion rands, which is about $30 to $40 billion, and 50% of it is retail, 30% of it is traditional offices. And so if you take that, that's 80% of physical space that actually needs to be repurposed in the world that we live in now. So we think we'll get to 1,000 pretty quickly, but it's not about just the numbers. As much as sustainable growth is important, we want to incrementally execute, and it needs to be sustainable in all forms. So if it takes us a year or 3 years, it's more about creating a sustainable business in all of its forms. And then I think the sky's the limit in South Africa, and we'll see what happens after that.
No, and you brought up a good point, because there's been tons of articles already during COVID that retail and commercial office space is getting decimated, like already. Everybody's getting used to ordering through Amazon, ordering stuff online, even the people, because now you have no choice. And they're working from home. And I think a lot more companies, Twitter just announced they could work from home for life. Google said through the end of 2020. And so people are, in myself included, and I never liked working from home ever. I had a very nice office, but honestly, I don't even know if I want to go back. I got used to working here for the last couple months, right? And so, but that's why I think the co-living spaces, which most of them already have co-working space, but I think they'll be even more common and put into place, in the future builds. I think there's going to be a lot more thought into like, how is this co-working component going to look, because most people are probably going to work in their same building where they live. I always talk about like a high rise. I envision high rises where it's like residential on the top and then workspace on the bottom in the same building. You just commute through your elevator, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think the whole world is just changing in respect to how we see physical space and the need for too much space. I think the first place people look at when trying to cut down costs is physical space. Rentals are obviously the first, people in rent. And I'd like to think that people have a similar view to life that we do in respect to looking after their people first, but sometimes that's not possible. So we're seeing sort of unemployment rise to new levels. I mean, South Africa, we've historically been in the 28 to 30% mark, and that's looking closer to 40%, which is crazy. And I know in the US it's right up as well. So, physical space is the first place that people will cut, which will affect offices substantially. I don't necessarily agree that in brackets, co-work spaces are going to just thrive as a result of traditional offices downsizing. I think they'll pick up the pieces. So I think what's going to happen is that as companies reduce space, they'll take up space in co-work, but I don't think it's a no-brainer. I still think there's going to be a big impact, even at a co-working level. I mean, there's obviously a massive supply in traditional economies like London and New York and things like that. And even at a co-working level, I think people are going to reduce space. And so I'm interested to see the impact. I'm hoping for the industry that because of customer service levels that you get at a co-working space and all the other value adds, that it will continue to do well. I think from a co-living perspective, oh man, we all need community, you know. So as much as you know, people are getting rid of physical space, you can't get rid of where you sleep. You need a place to stay.
Good
so
point.
You know, yeah, you can't. It's, as an asset class for me, it's probably one of the most low risk if you've got systems in place and you can manage areas and your product is good and your price point is good, etc., etc. But you're never going to cut down on what you might do is you might go from a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment that you're paying, you know, $1,500 to $2,000, and you might end up paying $750 for a suite at a co-living place because you've got health and wellness, you've got access to friends and you know, a whole bunch of other value adds that you wouldn't normally get in a traditional setting. So as an asset class, I think it's going to continue to grow. And I think, you know, the benefits that extend to co-living will extend further to other categories as well. And the living experience will change. I mean, the common guys are doing really cool things in respect to building and tech for their workforce housing platform, Noah. And there's no reason why all the value that comes with shared economy can't be brought into multiple categories. In South Africa, we've got a huge affordable housing problem, as an example. And I like to call it accessible housing because it's a little bit more aspirational. And, you know, we have a shortage of 200,000-300,000 homes a year that neither the government or the private sector can fulfill. So, and for me, just coming back to why we exist in the first place, if we can build neighborhoods, thriving neighborhoods that are underpinned by good, solid principles in sort of positively benefiting communities, we can bring everything we're doing already in the co-living space into sort of more formal sectors like affordable housing and offer seamless tech, a living experience that's connected, where it's just that much better. So yeah, but context will obviously define what that looks like. And, you know, township or rural area in South Africa is very different to Cape Town or where we are developing the space. So for us, really understanding the requirement to build contextually appropriate spaces is essential, because you can't, there's no one, everything is different. So one solution doesn't necessarily match the other. And I think as developers and as property people, we've got to create spaces that are a reflection of the areas that we find them in, and take what works and make it better.
No, and Murray, I think your approach is so perfect, right? Because it's like, and I know you're in a higher end, you know, area. You could talk about the area in a second of where this first one is. And yeah. I think the brands that have done that, you know, you go higher end, the margins are better. You create your brand, you get your brand out there and have the great brand reputation. And then you have the room to start breaking into the affordable housing, right?
Got you.
That's actually, but some people I've talked to, the margins are even better on affordable housing. So.
Yeah, you know, I think housing is like a constitutional right, and in South Africa and Africa in particular, we can't fulfill the obligations that are required in terms of our constitution, because there's just a massive shortage. So co-living presents a solution in one form or another to help solving that problem. And it's not just the function of co-living, but it's everything, the way you approach deal procurement to collaboration to construction and development to innovative constructive techniques that fast track the development process, the delivery process, the onboarding process, the way in which communities and people interact with one another, the value that comes from having shared economy principles that exist within a space, whether it be pop-up, wellness classes or dinners on Friday night or community events and talks and things that just carry value. We live such isolated lives, unfortunately, as a function of the world that we live in. And so we need to sort of find solutions as the next generation of property people that bring us back to a place that's far healthier and far more sustainable and more conducive to sort of sustainable living and working and experiencing life. And I think that's where we all need to sort of come together as a community of out-of-the-box thinkers to try and find some solutions that are more than just providing a space for community. I think we can be doing a lot more. And so we're excited to use Neighbourgood as a platform to achieve that.
No, you just answered my next question. I was going to talk about community and the things you guys are doing, are going to do to facilitate that. So that it sounds like you guys that's amazing.
Yeah. So I think for us, I'm of the opinion that communities need to grow organically. You don't want to force things down people's throats, and try and have events every night. There is a human element. So we will have community managers that interface with our members. Customer service is massive for us. So I think that for us, if you read, I'm a big fan of Danny Mayer, who founded a company called Union Square Hospitality. And I probably read his book about 3 times. And I value everything that he says so much because he just takes hospitality and customer experience to the next level. And so for me, really making sure that we get that right is critical. Health and wellness is obviously a big thing. I think, these days to live sort of a more fulfilled life, we are a lot more aware of what wellness looks like. And it's obviously very different to everyone, but we're really producing cool classes that people can join, both our members and outside people, and just encouraging people to live more consciously. And so I'm really excited about wellness looks like within our spaces. Fortunately, at the space we're creating, there's this just beautiful rooftop that I am definitely going to be doing yoga classes on every morning. And then there's access to gyms and other wellness spaces, which I'm excited about. And then, I come from an entrepreneurial background, so I really value what entrepreneurship means. Not everyone's an entrepreneur, and that's just fine. It takes sort of different people to make a thriving neighborhood. But we're going to integrate lots of value-added talks and things that we think have value to the community that we're building there. And then, Cape Town being what it is, there's so much rich culture around food experiences, and and there's just some incredible chefs and small independent food and beverage operators that we're going to support. And so we'll bring in lots of food and beverage within the space, and we'll work with operators and chefs and foodies in the area to try and bring their product into the space. And then everything from A to Z. I've got a booklet which is about that thick that I'm busy building that will launch soon, that'll have all the detail.
I love that's awesome. And so I know you've joined us, which was super exciting at our, we're doing our weekly Wednesday forums where co-living operators from around the world are coming on, especially during COVID, but I'm pretty positive I'll keep them going because they've just been so valuable. So I'm glad you came on the last one.
No, thank you.
Yeah. And so we chatted, we've chatted in them a couple times. I don't know if it was last week about, hotel conversions. So again, like you'd said, taking all this excess space that's going to come available, whether it's distressed hotels, if office space, if you're able to convert it to residential, depending on zoning. So what are your thoughts? Or no, actually, let's talk about the project you're taking over because you are having to convert it.
I mean, I don't know how the short-term industry is going to get through this. It's going to be 24 months of pain, without a doubt. I mean, I've been following the industry closely. listening to, organizations like Skift and others, sort of understanding what the Marriotts of the world are saying. Generally, the guys tend to be cautiously optimistic because they have to be. But the reality is in the data, and the data is telling us right now that there's just a massive impact in short term. And for me, co-living provides stability because there's contractual income. The project that we are taking on is a pivot from not an old hotel, but sort of a traditional apartment style hotel. I mean, you're seeing a lot of companies internationally that have got big master leases, and the arbitrage is really in that sort of difference between your contractual rent and your short-term gross income. I think that's completely blown out of the water right now. We're seeing a lot of Airbnb stock come onto the market, so there's just a flood of rentals that are coming on, which means that there's going to be pressure on price. A unit that might have rented for $1,500 is now going to be priced at $1,000 because there's just a massive oversupply in stock, which means that there's going to be even more pressure just generally. And I guess it's good that rentals come down because people are under so much pressure financially at the moment. And, hopefully co-living provides an answer to that solution outside of all the other values that it's got. But we think that hotels are a real opportunity. There's just a massive supply of them, from sort of boutique guest house, B&B type operations, which are more moms and pops, to sort of fully integrated short-term management agreements, the Marriotts of the world, the Hiltons of the world, and all of these spaces. And there's some great companies out there that are doing incredible things. The other day you mentioned a company called Selena, who I'm working with at the moment to bring them into the country because I love what they do and I love their brand and the spirit of how they do it. But the reality is that there's just not too many people at the moment as a result of everything we've gone through who are staying short-term, a week, a few days. As I understand it, people are talking about staying in places longer, so not experiencing lockdown and whatever form it is internationally in their homes, but actually renting out hotel space so that they can be in a different environment, which is interesting. But for me, there's an opportunity for people who have great co-living brands, and there's a lot of them out there who can efficiently approach landlords, not via the hotel operators, obviously, to provide a solution to a short to medium-term cash flow problem. And the reality is that in terms of how these management agreements are structured, the landlord ultimately has to cover the fixed expenses. So what's happened is that you've gone from, let's say, an 85% occupancy down to a 15% occupancy if you're lucky, but your expenses are still sitting at 45 to 50% of your projected gross income. So now all of a sudden you're going backwards. So what co-living potentially provides is a solution to the income problem. Okay, you might not get what you would have got had you been at 90% let, but you'll probably get to 60 to 70%. But it will be in 6 to 12 month leases, so there won't be any cash flow burning, etc., etc. And the lease up process is super quick too. So it might take 6 to 12 weeks, possibly 16 weeks, depending on the size of the project, but it's fixed income and you can bank it. So from a bankability point of view, it's much more recognized as stable versus short-term, which obviously affects everything from your gearing levels to your ability to finance the project. So yeah, I just think there's a massive opportunity for decent co-living operators who can really sort of, and I hate to say the word take advantage of the situation or even capitalize on the situation because it's such a terrible situation we find ourselves in, but to be a problem solver and to find a solution to the problem that we're all going through at the moment. So Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Very, yes, very well said. Very well stated. I appreciate that. And then on the retro, what are some components on this retrofit that you guys are having to physically change?
So I find hotels to be super clinical, and like I've never enjoyed staying at hotels. So the space that we take over lacks a bit of depth in respect to what it look and feels like. I don't think I saw a plant in the whole place. And I'm always sort of looking for sort of interesting, if you look at my home, we've got plants everywhere and it's like, it just feels like a good space. So we definitely want to brighten the place up a lot. Obviously, because we're coming in at a management level, CapEx is a limitation. The fund are already very cognizant of the fact that there's no income at the moment. So CapEx is going to be an issue in respect to asking for too much to do too much. So we're going to try and get quite clever, pull in our team, try and spruce up the place as much as possible using sort of lots of plants, white walls, sort of Scandinavian themes that we all love. And then we'll obviously bring in a lot of our Neighbourgood branding into the physical space as well. We'll integrate the Kindred tech that you guys have worked with us on. And we'll bring in a lot of sort of shared economy themes that will include co-work. So there'll be a lot of work-related value adds within the physical space because it was traditionally just a hotel. A lot more sort of chill areas, soft furnishings. And then because we've got this beautiful deck and pool, we really want to focus on bringing that to life. We are blessed in this country with beautiful weather. So we've got sort of 10 months of sort of 25 to 30 degree Celsius weather that we can enjoy. So I want to encourage people to spend a lot more time on that deck and swimming and what we call braaiing, or what you guys call barbecuing. So yeah, just focusing on the simple things, but getting those right and just making the experience of living for our community that much better.
Awesome. Oh my God, that's going to be super cool. So there was no because it's a hotel conversion, there was already in-suite bathrooms. Was there like a mini kitchen at all?
Yeah, so there's some of the units are 3-bedroom family units, and it's super modern in respect to how it's been designed. So there's these like beautiful shutters that open onto living areas. All of them, fortunately, are en suite. So I think one thing that I've taken from a lot of your interviews is how important it is to have that 1-to-1 ratio. And we sort of share that. I don't think people like to share bathrooms that much. So we're really trying to integrate that into our designs. So there's a combination of sort of 2 and 3 beds. And then there's also a series of bachelors, inverted commas, all have their own smart TVs, all have aircon, beautiful king size beds, workspace. There's a lot of stuff that's already there that we can reuse. I mean, it was this fairly plush hotel that already has a great standard of finish. We just want to bring the magic and try and bring it to life. And then obviously make sure we're integrating customer service and all the shared economy value adds that we've been talking about. So yeah, it's sort of like this mixed space that is a combination, but it works perfectly for co-living. And we don't have to do too much brick and mortar redesign to make it work. We can almost just adapt, give it a facelift, bring in sort of some Neighbourgood magic and breathe life into it in the function of what we do more than what the physical space looks like.
Awesome. And I know that's, I'm glad you mentioned workspace within the suites versus, and I know you have the big co-working space for everybody to use and the public to use. I do think that's another thing that COVID has changed. There's even a developer in Los Angeles because he's literally making the bedrooms on these next phases of the build outs. Bedrooms are larger so that there's room for desk. Because again, during this quarantine time, you can't have 50 people or 20 people, sharing a co-working space. So, have an in-suite bathroom, have a little workspace in your bedroom, helps during these times, right?
Massively, yeah. I think you'll see a lot of these home office companies where their valuations will be blown out of the water at the moment, because there's just so much pivoting around what was to what is now coming. And so we need to get used to working from home in sort of more sustainable manners. I found productivity to be quite good. I don't know about you, but it's been an interesting experience, and I'm sure everyone feels the same. But it definitely makes sense to integrate co-work or work solutions into sort of co-living spaces that provide sufficient distance from your community members, etc., etc. Because we don't necessarily know if this is going to be the last time that this happens either. I mean, so I think we really need to be designing spaces that allow for the way in which we're going to live moving forward, that integrates a combination of both community-centric related offerings, both at a living and working level, but also the ability to be private and enjoy the privacy that comes with having a desk in your own room, etc., etc. But yeah, it just means we all have to work in our pajamas for the next, and we don't even have to leave our rooms because we just work from there.
I know, right? But I keep dressing up, and my housemates are like, "Why are you dressing up every day?" And I just have to, because it just puts me in like the work mode, and it's like another separation of like, okay, work versus home. Because I don't like, that's the downfall, is you don't want to blend the two, because then it's hard to relax at home. So I'm working in an area of the home that I'm never in, like this big dining room area that we hardly ever use. So then it separates and then I dress up, and I just try to normalize everything as much as I could. Because like I said, it was a shock to like not be working in an office. And now it's been going on for months. We thought it was going to just be for a couple weeks, but yeah, they had to ease us into it, right? And I've already posted.
I know, it's strange.
Yeah. It's unique, but one thing I missed the most was I had an electric standing desk that I used at my office.
Oh, did you?
Oh, loved it. Yeah, it was really great. And so I came home and I'm like, so now I use cardboard boxes. I put a picture on LinkedIn. People were just cracking up because that's my new standing desk, is these cardboard boxes, but it actually works pretty well. If anybody, that's a tip for everybody.
Good idea. You should register that trademark.
I know, right? Cardboard boxes for in lieu of a standing desk. Yeah, but I will say, even this weekend, my thing is like, I miss going, on the weekends I might pop into a cafe with my laptop and work a little bit, just to be, but we can't do that right now. But I do miss that. I do miss co-working. And I think you're like, I think co-working space is here to stay. I think you're right. People love that community aspect. It's just like, how is that going to look if everybody's going to be 6 feet apart? So then the density isn't there. So
I think offices, the space that we're creating is like 85% physical offices. So it's almost like an integrated workspace offering. It's not co-work in the traditional sense. So at the very least, you've got the privacy of your own office, where you may have 2 or 3 people. But even then, you're sitting next to your colleague who's next door, and it's like, if you look at the efficiencies that, the guys like WeWork and Convene work off, it's like almost one into every 6 square meters. So you're super close to the person next to you. And I think that's going to be the challenging part, is, the whole model around co-work is being more efficient with space and densifying areas up. So the unit economics are highly affected by COVID, because you basically losing a bit of that, the upside that comes from being more efficient with space. So we're going to just watch it closely. We're going to bank, we think people are still going to want to rent space in offices, and both big and small companies, but rather sort of more traditional offices, versus just open co-work space where there's lots of flexible themes, etc., integrated into a mixed use environment where you can also go and grab your coffee and sort of experience life as it was a few months ago, but just in a different form. I think there's going to be so many of these hole in the wall operations that get set up that sort of offer both an online solution, a click and collect, or sort of a phone and collect solution. I don't think restaurants in their traditional form make sense anymore to an extent. You know, this like 200, 300, 400 square meter space is just, it's just an operating expense that you don't need. So I think you're just going to see a big movement away from traditional stores that have too much redundant space. And so, yeah, I'm seeing a big movement already towards efficiency in the retail space, smaller format stores, 50% online turnover, 50% physical, sometimes even more. I mean, you're already seeing the stats coming out of Uber and, you know, delivery platforms where food delivery is etching up to sort of 50, 60%, sometimes even higher. Food delivery kitchens only, like cloud kitchens and all of those others in the States. So there's just going to be a movement towards that. Less and less space, but more and more experience. I don't think you can ever get rid of that. So we're still going to be looking for those experiences and those connections to human beings and communities and people that you just can't get from living a secluded life in your home. I just don't. I think it's not antisocial, but it's anti-human in terms of how we built. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the property sector.
Yeah, and you read my mind. I was going to mention restaurants because you're right. They're going to have to start back at 50% occupancy. Everybody has to be spread out, and their margins are so small as it is. Like, I don't know how that's even going to work. I mean, I'm just going to be, yeah.
I think what's going to happen is it's going to be a lot of turnover. I think that the way in which we structure lease agreements will change. So I think there'll be industry standards in terms of, you know, what does a food and beverage deal look like? Okay, 8 to 10% is the number. Cool. So then we sign agreements with landlords that are aligned in respect to we share in your upside and your downside alike, versus just this traditional 5-10 year lease agreement, which has been historically the way in which we work. But even saying that, I still think tenants are going to take less and less space. I mean, physical retail is just becoming the touch point. It's becoming the place that you tell a story. It's been, the evolution of retail has been happening like this since like the late 90s, when Amazon and everyone, you know, and the Alibabas of the world happened. And now what COVID has done is it's just sort of thrusted us into this next phase of digital growth, and it's seeing physical retail in all of its forms and physical in general having to pivot completely to reinvent itself in the world that we live now. And it's been a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that people are out of their comfort zones and having to adjust and are having to adapt to, you know, let's say an online business that they never had before. And all of a sudden they're realizing, wow, I'm making like 80% of turnover that I was, and I wasn't even doing that like 3 months ago. So it's like this light bulb moment, and people are saying, actually, I can run a more efficient business like this. So that's the good side. It's forced people out of their comfort zones. It's made people think out of their box because you have to. The downside, obviously, it's come at the cost of employment and you know, people's are really under financial pressure globally. There's a massive impact on our economies. But it's been great to see how collaborative, you know, everyone has been in respect to finding solutions to problems. And as entrepreneurs, naturally, we are problem solvers. So the best way to solve problems is to, you know, put it on the table, talk about it, and try and think creatively about how to solve them.
No, that's true. And you nailed it also with the, I'm curious to see, I think you're right. You said, hey, 50% of orders might be done online now, right? And they could take smaller space, these restaurants, these cafes. Just yesterday, there's this really great coffee shop here in San Diego. There's 2 locations. It's incredible coffee. And they closed down during COVID starts. They completely shut both locations down. But then 3 weeks later, they opened up, they have a table out front, and they're inside outside, and you go out front. Their app, they built this app. They had to have built it in like 3 weeks flat. It's so user friendly. It's easy. It gives you a countdown clock on like when your coffee's ready. You just walk up front and they hand it to you. And again, I think you're right. I mean, that's less staff. That's easier. That's more efficient.
Way better.
Using technology and I guarantee now that's an app that's it'll be interesting to see how their sales shift even post-COVID. We're bringing on Dror, who he came on the show back in January.
Yeah, he's cool.
Oh my gosh. Oh, good. You already know.
I've spoken to him before. Yeah.
Okay. Did you read his book, Rethinking Real Estate?
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Joel. I mean, the guy's an authority in the retail and physical space. He's just someone that I follow.
Yeah, so he's coming back on post because his book was written pre-COVID. However, his ideas and his future projections all made so much sense. And now I think it just got accelerated like almost overnight with COVID on what he was already predicting was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
With rentals, Airbnb, commercial space. So he's coming back on real soon. I just messaged him. I'm like, we got to bring you back on because now, you know, the world has changed. So
And yeah, I think the reality is I think the challenging thing is how brands are going to tell stories online. I think for me, getting to know a brand would always happen in the physical. So you would meet the face behind the independent that sold the coffee, and part of the experience was watching them make your coffee and that interactive process of, you know, knowing where the beans came from and all of those good things. And now with sales moving online, 60 to 70%, it opens up this entire window of consumers that you never had before, potentially, because it sort of takes you out of your little store format and extends your order delivery network to a far greater geographic area. But at the same time, it then limits your ability to tell a story. So that storytelling, I think, is going to have to be effectively done in the digital world across social media. And, you know, so there's going to be a lot of interesting storytelling that exists that people hopefully will start getting used to understanding. So I'm interested to just see how people change the way they tell their stories at a brand level online more so than the physical space. And I think, you know, draws someone who will definitely have a lot of insight into what that looks like. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room for growth for small business and big business alike to come out of this a lot better than we were before we went into it. So I'm excited to see what comes of it.
No, definitely.
I'm optimistic.
Yes. No, I love I could tell you are. I mean, and this is, you know, again, for this interview, you're right about to open and launch, and you've been working on this for how many months have you been working on this? Or years?
Yeah, we've been working on the Cape Quarter project for about 6 months. Okay. It started off with a co-work component first, but the co-living has come up in the last 3 to 4 months. Okay. So it was fairly quick.
Yeah, but again, COVID hits, and you're still being optimistic. Yeah, I love that for everybody listening.
Yeah,
like it's not, you know, we'll pull through this. We're not worried about it.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, and you mentioned already 2 brands that you love, Selena. You mentioned Common. Is there any other global brands, co-living brands that you think are doing amazing?
Co-living. Selena are obviously phenomenal in terms of, you know, I've caught up with their leadership and they're really cool. I love how they integrate combination of surf culture into the space. I love how they talk about Selena as a human being almost. Selena as a brand is sort of, they talk about her as this like 28 to 30-year-old nomadic woman that sort of cruises the world and lives in different spaces. So I love how they presented her as a brand and the spirit to why they exist. I mean, the Star City boys I caught up with the other day. I mean, we're looking at investing in companies in the US as well. We're looking at a hedge. You know, we've got things like inflation in South Africa that is we have to consider. So we're chatting to a few guys over there that are really cool. Sure, there's so many young up and coming brands in the co-living space at an entrepreneurial level that are just doing really well. There's probably too many to count, but I think it's lots of exciting operators and brands in the space that I think will come from it. And I love the why people exist versus, you know, what they do. I think that that we're sort of new age entrepreneur that thinks about social impact and thinks about sustainability. So I just, in my interactions with operators and developers and owners in the space that we're in, it's just so much more refreshing than dealing with old school real estate companies that have been driven by distribution growth for so long, and you almost want to fall asleep at the meetings because it's just about satisfying investor returns, which I think we can do anyway, but I think we can achieve just a far better sustainable result all around than just ticking finance as a metric, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And you have no idea how many real estate developers that have been in the game for 20, 30 years are now like, there's not going to be 98% occupancy, 100%. And now they're like, oh my gosh, we need to innovate. The regular multifamily product that they were doing for however many years, 20, 30 years. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, this isn't going to work that well anymore. So that's been good.
I know. I don't want to say I told you so, but I mean, I did tell them so, like for the last 5 years. So, but anyway, it's one of those things.
Okay, Murray. Well, great. I'm so glad we're having such a great conversation. I don't want it to end, but I have one more question for you.
Yeah, no problem.
Where do you see co-living in 10 years? So the year 2030.
So I think the principles of co-living are going to extend to co-housing and retirement. I think the value and shared economy, as I said earlier, will filter all the way through to every possible housing solution. There's just, for me, no downside to flexibility and community and tech and value add. So it will extend across all the platforms, and it won't just be in the sort of 18 to 30-year-old bracket that we've put ourselves in for the moment. I think that it will be extended to a far more mixed use environments. The sort of more sustainable, successful ones will integrate neighborhood themes, not necessarily all in the same physical space, but where there's connection to digital, to businesses, both physical and digital, within the same platform. Just by our very nature, we are more collaborative in the way we think and the way we operate as co-living developers and managers. So I think it will be less isolated as homes and more integrated into neighborhoods. And it will just be a lot more accessible to the public who don't really understand it. In South Africa specifically, we're quite conservative. I almost have to rebrand what co-living means, because they conservative, traditional real estate people think about it as a sort of this like happy thing that exists, obviously that happened in the 70s and no one really understands it. So we're trying to sort of move away from traditional thinking, and I think it will be a lot more mainstream. It will be, people will understand it, they'll know what it means, and it will be something that gets brought into more than just entry-level housing for young professionals.
Very well put. And you guys start occupancy how soon for the first occupancy?
We'll onboard members 1 July. So if you mentioned to me that you were considering moving to Cape Town, so we've got your first suite ready.
I don't know about moving, but I'll definitely come visit for a while.
Overlooking Table Mountain with ocean views. And we'll do a discount for you.
Oh my gosh, maybe I will stay. That sounds amazing.
Exactly.
That is awesome, Murray. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll have all your details in the show.
My pleasure. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Great to see you. Cheers, Christine. Thanks, Abe. Bye.
Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. If you want to learn more about co-living, you could check out my book on Amazon, The Co-Living Code. And of course, if you're looking for the perfect software to power your co-living concept, check out kindred.io, KNDRD.io. Thanks. And a quick thank you to SPX Agency for all of the graphics, animation, and design on our YouTube channel.